Hey y'all, welcome back to your girl's channel. So excited to be talking to you today about the OCD stigma, OCD subtypes, as well as how I received my OCD diagnosis. I want to talk to you about these things because everything else I'm going to talk about on this channel is obviously from my perspective. I struggle with OCD, so I just want to break down different types of topics in the OCD realm. Before we get started, I want you to go ahead and stop. Go ahead and like this video, subscribe, help your girl's channel grow. The first thing I want to talk to you about is just what OCD is. So OCD is a cycle. You start with this obsession that makes you incredibly anxious. Then, in order to get rid of the obsession, the thought in your brain, you will do a compulsion. Once you do that compulsion, it relieves the anxiety and you're like, I feel great. However, that cycle then is strengthened because what you're telling yourself is, oh, I need to do this compulsion in order to relieve my anxiety. So that's the whole cycle of OCD is there's an obsession, there's a compulsion to relieve the anxiety that you're experiencing, and then ultimately, once your anxiety is gone, there's another obsession, followed by then another compulsion. And then what you're doing is you are just rewiring your brain that you need to do a compulsion every time you have anxiety. Now, you've probably heard in your lifetime about OCD. You've probably had a friend who likes things exactly in a specific order, and they say something like, oh, I'm so OCD, or you have somebody who stresses out when they can't go back and check the stove. Like, oh, I can't stop thinking about it, I'm OCD. And although that could be OCD, these are not the only things people who struggle with OCD deal with. And so what I want to do today is I want to talk about some different subtypes in OCD that I wish I would have known a long time ago when I started to notice the cycle that I was going through. I thought OCD was just hand washing or was just keeping things in order. And that's just not the case. And so today I'm going to be talking about some subtypes of OCD that match that stigma of hand washing and making sure things are in order. But I'm also going to talk about some subtypes of OCD that don't go along with what you think maybe OCD actually is. And these ones are the subtypes I've actually struggled with, which is why it took me so long to get the OCD diagnosis that I'm going to talk about at the end of the video. The first two subtypes I want to talk about are the ones that you probably are aware of. First one I want to talk about is contamination OCD. This is the one where you have this anxiety or you have this obsession that you're contaminated with something, that you have germs on your hand. You just can't get that thought out of your mind. Therefore, your compulsion is hand washing. You take a shower for 2 hours a day. You're doing something extreme over and over again to relieve the anxiety, but guess what? It just comes back again. So that's one that you might think of when you think about OCD. You also might think of the subtype of counting OCD. This is where you have to do something a certain amount of times, otherwise something bad will happen. So this is the one where you need something in a perfect order. This is the one where you might have to take the doorknob and turn it 3 times before you leave the house. Otherwise, you think something bad is going to happen. Now, I want to talk to you about some of the subtypes that you might not be aware of when it comes to OCD. These types don't necessarily have compulsions that you think of when you think of OCD. When you think of compulsions, you think of turning a doorknob 3 times. You think of going back to check the stove. You think of ordering something in a specific manner. These ones that I'm going to talk about, the compulsion isn't necessarily visual. So the first one I want to talk about is false memory OCD. In this one, the obsession would be you have a situation that you are thinking about over and over and over in your brain, and you're trying to remember what happened. The compulsion then becomes you can't stop thinking about it because you need to remember it just the way it happened. And so you create this false memory because our memories are flawed. Another one would be harm OCD. This one, your obsession is I'm going to harm the people that are closest to me. So you have a thought about I'm going to suffocate my child. As crazy as it sounds, people think about these things. And then your compulsion in this case would be trying to make it right in your brain. I'm not this, I'm not this. You're battling. You also might avoid those people in your life who you have these thoughts about. You also might confess to the people that you love to make sure that you're not this person. Another subtype is just right OCD. This is where you are writing out something and you make the tiniest mistake. Well, then your compulsion becomes, I need to do it again until I get it right. So the obsession is I didn't do it right. The compulsion is I need to do it right. I don't care how many times it is. Now, this one can be really hard for people to hear and think about, but another one is pedophilia OCD. This is where a person gets an unwanted sexual thought about a child. The obsession is thinking about these unwanted sexual thoughts, and the reason why OCD starts to happen is because that isn't actually you. You don't actually want to think in a sexual way about children, and so because of that, your compulsion is you might avoid children completely because you're not sure what you're gonna do. You might confess again to somebody you love and say, I'm having this thought. This isn't actually me, right? Again, OCD is fueled by anxiety. Anxiety comes from fear. These aren't actually things that we want to be thinking about. However, the cycle comes when we have this anxiety and we have the immense fear from the thought. Another one I want to talk about is purely obsessional OCD. This one is where you have any distressing thought about anything, and then you just think to overcompensate that thought. So for instance, the thought that might come to your head if you're a mom would be, I'm a terrible mom. And so pure O is what they call it, is you would just now think about all things to combat that thought. That's another one that, again, isn't necessarily something you can see. It doesn't necessarily identify with the OCD stigma, but it's just as hard for people. Now I want to talk about two subtypes that I have personally struggled with. So the first one that I've struggled with is called sexual orientation OCD. So what happens is you have a thought about, oh, am I gay? And you've never had this thought before, or something might trigger it, like somebody of the same sex who walks by and you think they're attractive. And then all of a sudden, your mind goes to, oh my goodness, what if I'm gay? Although you've never had this thought before in your life, there's now fear added to the thought. And so the compulsion in this case is checking online to see if you find women attractive. It could be taking quizzes online to see, okay, am I gay or am I not gay? It could be avoiding women who you find attractive, or it might be confessing to somebody that you care about that you're having this thought so that they can, again, reassure you. The last one that I've struggled quite a bit with is called relationship OCD. This OCD and these thoughts attach to the people that you care about the most. It doesn't just have to be the person that you're dating, that you're married to, your significant other. It could be your best friend. It could be somebody that you care about a lot, your mom, your dad. I want to talk quickly though about relationship OCD from the lens of somebody that you're dating, your significant other. For me, this has been one that I've struggled with a lot. I've had the most amazing boyfriend for about 1.5 years now, and my thoughts attached to the things that I care about the most. And so for the last 1.5 years, he's been a massive part of my life. And so of course, thoughts are going to attach to the things you care about. Otherwise, there's no fear behind it. And so in this case, my relationship OCD would attach to seeing if he's the person that I want to marry. From like first couple weeks of dating, I would overanalyze. Is he going to be the one? Is he the one? Something else that I've struggled with in my OCD, in my relationship OCD, is analyzing everything about their character. Not allowing them to be who they are, but analyzing every little thing that maybe you don't necessarily like, but then making that bigger than it is. Another thing you might think about in your relationship OCD is, does this person still care about me? Are they still interested in me? And so the compulsions for relationship OCD are confessing. That was a big one for me. I would confess every single thought in my mind. I'm going to talk more about relationship OCD in a future video because this is one that I've struggled with the most. And so my desire is to help people who maybe struggle with OCD as well. The subtypes that I just listed are not the only things that people with OCD struggle with. There are different subtypes that maybe I haven't listed. Something I want to name before we get to the history of my diagnosis is everybody in the world gets intrusive thoughts. Intrusive thoughts are thoughts that intrude your brain. You aren't choosing to think these thoughts. These thoughts just come in. They're intruders in your brain. Most people can just let those thoughts go. People with OCD struggle to let them go because they think they have value. They think that that's actually who they are, and they assign fear to those thoughts, and that's why those thoughts stick. I also want to name too that people with OCD have to do compulsions to get rid of these thoughts. These compulsions may be hand washing, they may be ordering something, they also just may be stopping to think, so you can't engage in conversations because you're now performing a compulsion in your brain. So people with OCD struggle to maintain a healthy life because their compulsions are getting in the way. Now I want to talk about my OCD diagnosis. I want to share this because I hope that somebody watching this, it doesn't take you as long as I did to receive the diagnosis. I hope that you can watch this video and you're like, oh my goodness, that is me. And so you don't have to wait 5-6 years to get the treatment that you so deserve, and that will bring you so much healing. So when I was 23 years old, the first thought hit. I was fresh out of college, I was in an apartment, and I got a bug bite on my leg. Now, the normal person would have saw the bug bite, oh, I got a bug bite, whatever, and they would have just let it go. My brain spiraled to, oh my goodness, you have bed bugs. Yep. And so what I did was I ordered sheets to protect myself from bed bugs. I checked my sheets, checked my bed almost every single night. And not just for like a couple minutes, for hours, going through my sheets, making sure that I didn't have bed bugs. No matter the number of compulsions, no matter the number of checks that I did, I spiraled back to, I have bed bugs. The person with OCD doesn't assign logic to their problem. Most people, if they check their bed, no bed bugs, great, I don't have bed bugs. Somebody with OCD, they do the compulsion, they still aren't convinced that they don't have bed bugs. I struggled with this thought for maybe a couple weeks until then it was gone. It was like poof, not there anymore, didn't struggle with it at all, but a new one came. So many different thoughts would come over the course of the first couple years, and I was hit with, I have no idea why I'm experiencing these thoughts. And I was so frustrated that I had to do these compulsions to get rid of the anxiety. I didn't truly know that I had a problem until about 2 years into this cycle. There was one day that I was at a spin class at my previous gym, and a thought came into my head about the spin instructor. I looked at her, I was like, oh, she's really pretty. And then all of a sudden, oh my goodness, what if I'm gay? I obsessed for months about whether I was gay. I didn't have this thought in the first 23 years of my life, but then just because I saw somebody who I found attractive, who I thought was pretty, now I had myself convinced that I was gay. See, again, the thing with OCD is you can't use logic to bring yourself out of the thought. There isn't any compulsion that will actually answer the question. It's the question, it's the compulsion, but then it's right back to the same question because you're not convinced that that question is 100% answered. I struggled with this one for about 6 months, and it ended up going away. I would be triggered here and there when I heard about people who were gay, things like that. But for the most part, I was good. I didn't really struggle with that thought anymore, but guess what? Another one came in. During these years, these 4 years in which I first struggled with thoughts, I tried counseling, I tried regular talk therapy. When I was struggling at the beginning of my relationship with thoughts, I tried a Christian counselor who I thought would be great. And what we did in this counseling was we tried to get to the root of the problem, meaning, oh, you think you're gay? Like, where's that actually coming from? When in reality, people who struggle with OCD, you can't do that. You can't assign any meaning to the thought because that's why the whole problem exists, is because you assign meaning, and then meaning is then associated with fear, and then the spiral continues. And so you better believe that this therapy was actually more damaging than good. I was asked to go to roots that had no meaning, and I was left in a worse spot than when I started. I believe the first thing that truly helped me was reading the book Overcoming Unwanted Intrusive Thoughts by Sally Winston. This book, oh my goodness, it was like a light bulb went off in my mind when I was reading this book. I was like, yes, this is me. I have intrusive thoughts. I assign too much meaning to them. I get triggered in my brain. My amygdala is triggered, and all of a sudden there's fear, all this stuff. This book, if you struggle with intrusive thoughts, read it. I will link it in the bio because it is the book that changed my life. It changed my trajectory to realizing that, oh, there isn't necessarily a root here. I'm just assigning too much fear to these thoughts. And then the compulsion is actually making it so much worse. I believe that reading that book was the first way that God helped me find healing. I'm going to talk eventually on this channel about how God directed me to the perfect books, to the perfect people, to the perfect therapy to help me heal. But for now, I'll leave it at that of thank you, God, for allowing me to see that book and read that book. After that book, I found quite a bit of healing. Meaning I understood myself more. I understood that, okay, just limit the compulsion and you're good to go. However, it still wasn't enough for me. I was still struggling in my relationship. I was still struggling with all these thoughts. I was taking medication. The medication was fine. It made it a little bit more bearable, but I was still struggling in my relationship. I was still struggling with relationship OCD. And so I knew I needed to do something else to beat this once and for all. So that is when I found NoCD. I will link them here too. They are an online platform that helps people with specifically OCD. I will give a massive shout out to NoCD. I could cry because they are changing, they are saving lives, because they are writing so much about OCD and what it actually is, and they are doing the therapy that needs to be done to help people to break this OCD cycle. And so when I found this therapy, I was hesitant, but I was motivated by my mom, my boyfriend, do this, get healthy, see if it works. And so I did it. And it was the most life-changing thing that I did because it was exactly for breaking this cycle that I had been struggling with for years. I won't say that it wasn't tough work. I'm going to talk in another video about specific OCD therapy, but praise God, I was diagnosed with OCD. I got the right treatment. I'm still on the road of recovery, but man, it has been the biggest blessing from God to receive the correct treatment to what you're struggling with. Y'all, thank you for watching this video. Thank you for investing your time into learning more about what OCD is, about the subtypes of OCD, and a little bit about my journey. I'm excited to bring you your next video. But in the meantime, go ahead and like, subscribe, and I'll see you next time.